Welcome back to the Toe Meets Leather College Football Podcast show. We don't know. We have our show on the YouTube channel. We don't have anything on podcast platforms yet, but that may be changing soon. First of all, in order to get to the upcoming national championship, we have to overview the bludgeoning that was Indiana over Oregon in the Peach Bowl. Indiana 56, Oregon 22. This one was not as I expected. I thought because Dan Lanning and Oregon were out-physicaled in their home stadium when they played Indiana in the regular season, that they were going to come out with an entirely different effort, that they had been thinking this over all season. And they very well may have, but it certainly didn't change the outcome because they were down 28-7. I think it was before the first quarter even finished. They got out physicaled again, and credit Oregon because at first they started off with some decent runs. They were gaining 4.6 yards per carry in the first quarter. The offensive line was doing well. Defensive line wasn't doing as well. They were limiting Indiana some, but there was a couple of chunk plays here and there in the first half of this game. It's a crazy thing if I tell you Oregon actually outgained Indiana in this game. Well, you think the score was so lopsided. How did Oregon outgain Indiana? They outgained them 378 to 362 in total yards, partially because the whole game Oregon was behind. They were not ahead. Well, they were tied at one point, but they were trailing pretty much the entire game. So because they were in trail mode, there was a lot of drives that went pretty much the length of the field, and they had to go for it on fourth down instead of kicking a field goal, which ended in a turnover on downs and no points. So you had a lot of long drives, but no points to show for it. And conversely, they gave Indiana the ball 3 times in their own territory. So Indiana had short fields 3 different times where they didn't have to gain many yards to score. So that's why you get this stat. From the jump, you obviously had the pick 6 play, and you had to crawl back. I mean, you saw the fight from that second drive that they had, the long drive they went down and scored to tie the game. But Indiana's offense, even when they didn't have short fields, was so good. They had that back shoulder ball that they were throwing to Elijah Surratt, who ended up having 7 catches for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns in this game. And then you also had Charlie Becker, who was just looking like a 5-star receiver with the catches he was making. He was amazing. He had 2 catches for 48 yards and a touchdown. And I'm not going to be one that makes the comparison between 2019 LSU and this year's Indiana team, but I will say that the chemistry between Fernando Mendoza, Elijah Surratt, and Charlie Becker, and how they just know, Fernando knows where to put the ball, Surratt and Becker know where the ball is going to be. It looks like the chemistry that 2019 offense had, where Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, they were just putting the ball where no defender could defend it. And the wide receiver, knowing where the ball was going to be, was able to make some spectacular plays. Pardon me. But the difference here is Fernando and Charlie Becker and Surratt, they only had 1 year together. Joe Burrow, they were there, I think, 2 years. I know Joe Burrow was there at least 2 years. And Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson were veteran receivers. So Fernando only had 1 offseason and then this regular season and postseason, whereas Burrow had 2 whole seasons and years for that chemistry to be, worked on and improved. And this was just over the span of 1 offseason. The real story in this game, I think, though, is the fact that Indiana's pass rush, even without Stephen Daly, which they didn't have him for the game against Alabama either, but even without Stephen Daly, and I thought highly of this Oregon O-line, their pass rush still got home. They garnered 3 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and just in general, they had Dante Moore looking out of sync. He just looked pressured and not really knowing what to do, what the best decision was. And there wasn't really a best decision against this defense because they were locking them down on the lines of scrimmage and in the secondary. And a lot of people were dogging Dante Moore for this performance, but I don't really blame him. I don't think a whole lot of quarterbacks would have done well in his situation against that defense. So I don't expect Dante Moore to be Superman against this defense. That's really what I was looking for coming into this game, was just how the trenches were going to play out, if Indiana's pass rush could get home, or if Oregon was going to step it up in protection on the O-line, because that's what happened in the last matchup. They pressured Dante Moore. He had the most interceptions that he had to that point, and the rest of the year, that was the most interceptions he had until this game. And so I thought if Oregon's trenches could hold up, they would have a shot, and if not, they wouldn't, and they didn't. So, not surprisingly, they got dominated again. Well, it was surprising that first game of the regular season, because we hadn't seen Indiana dominate somebody along the lines of scrimmage that was a good team. Like, talent-wise, Oregon is one of the top teams in the nation. And they just went into Autzen, dominated them in the trenches. The scoreboard didn't show or didn't reflect that they got dominated. But then they came out here and did it even worse than they did the time before. And Oregon had, more preparation this time and already knew what it was going to look like. And they still couldn't do anything about it. And I know Dan Lanning hates to be the least physical team on the field, or, not the most physical team on the field, because he is a very passionate guy, and he doesn't want to be the second most physical team on the field. Fernando, he's kind of showing me what Carson Beck's been showing me with the legs down the stretch. They've really haven't had to use them all that much this year, and then down the stretch when you have to try to cover all these other different pieces, he just takes off and runs. And then he surprisingly breaks tackles, and he's faster than he looks. It's kind of like Beck. Like, he was trying to be physical with guys against Oregon, and on the broadcast, Sean McDonough was concerned for Mendoza being in there in the fourth quarter and running the ball, and I was thinking, that's exactly what Cignetti wants. Like, that is the mentality Cignetti loves. And really both of these coaches, they're very, very hard-nosed guys. So just like in the regular season, in the second half, Indiana came out and leaned on Oregon, and Oregon couldn't do anything about it. Which, for the Miami-Indiana game, is going to be the key point again. And that's why I think Miami might have a shot on Monday night as opposed to Oregon. National Championship, Monday night, 7:30 p.m. on ESPN. Miami will take on the Indiana Hoosiers in their home stadium. I think they'll be on the visitors' sideline and they'll have visitors' uniforms. But nonetheless, in Miami Gardens. And this is the Hurricanes' home stadium. It's not even on campus. Rest in peace, Orange Bowl. Can Miami's pass rush get to Fernando Mendoza and disrupt him? That's the question that really determines the game for me. It's what it comes down to. Akeem Mesidor, Ahmad Moten, both of them are expected to play in this game after getting hurt last game. Moten was out. He was out a good bit, and then he came back for that Ole Miss game. Didn't even make it like 2 plays before he was hurt again. But both of these guys are D linemen, by the way, if you didn't know. And then Mesidor, he got hurt later in the game against Ole Miss, came back to play at the end, and they're saying it was an elbow injury and that he's going to be good to go. So we'll see how full strength they are in this matchup, because if they disrupt Fernando Mendoza and those back shoulder throws, those quick fade balls, those down the field heaves, then I'm not super worried about Indiana's run game against Miami. I know Miami can stop the run. I've seen it. Miami is 5th in rushing yards allowed per game nationally. So I think if they can prevent the pass, they can really limit the offense of Curt Cignetti. And unlike Oregon, Miami, like I said, can stop the run. Oregon ranks 26th in rushing yards allowed per game, and it showed up in the second half in the Peach Bowl. And if you don't get to Mendoza, if you don't get to the quarterback, he's going to light you up on offense. And we've seen it. We've seen it throughout the playoffs. People doubted him. People doubted Indiana. And they just keep proving people wrong. So I'm not going to, if I'm Miami, I'm not going to let Mendoza just dot me up, which is easier said than done. Now, this Miami's secondary is probably the best secondary Indiana will have seen all year. But it's tough to guard chemistry. And like I was saying, they have a certain chemistry about them that they just know where to place the ball, where the ball is going to be. That wide receiver quarterback connection is second to none this year. And Miami will have O.J. Frederick back, one of their best corners. He basically locked up Jeremiah Smith on the fade balls in their game in the Cotton Bowl when they played Ohio State. So maybe he's able to do that to Surratt, or maybe they put him on Becker. But regardless, I think Mendoza is a lot more precise of a passer than Julian Sand. And, you know, the stats say both of them are high percentage completion guys, but you look at Julian Sand film when they played big-time teams, look at Mendoza's film when he's played big-time teams, and one of them is more accurate. On the other side, the rushing game for Miami is what they want to do offensively. They want to impose their will. That's just Mario Cristobal's attitude. Although they rank just 68th nationally in rushing yards per game with 150, the mentality of this offense is we are bigger than you, we are stronger than you, and we're just going to fire off the ball and move you. Like there's not a whole lot of pin pull, power plays. Like it's just straight off the ball, man on man, and they're just going to push, which is their offensive style. And so the last 3 games, they've averaged 174 yards as opposed to the 150 over the course of the season. And so if Indiana can neutralize that run game, I think this offense might come to a screeching halt. Just imagine Carson Beck in 3rd and longs, and, you know, anyone in a 3rd and long in general, that's a tough situation. But Carson Beck in 3rd and longs, he really hasn't pushed the ball down the field that much, and when he does, he's inconsistent. Sometimes he's hitting guys, like in the Ole Miss game. First half, he's missing open guys. Second half, he's very precise with his passes. So you don't really know what you're going to get, especially in those 3rd and longs. It could lead to turnovers, interceptions, anything like that. And so, but my gut tells me that Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor have not been really stopped by anybody. So my gut tells me Miami, because they're X factors, and Miami has looked so physical in these playoffs. But my brain tells me that I've seen Miami's run game stopped, like in the SMU and the Louisville game, but I've never seen Indiana's back shoulder ball and that dynamic aspect between Becker and Surratt and Mendoza really stopped. The closest I would say that happened was the Penn State game, and even in that game, they ended up winning. So I'm going to make Indiana, or I guess Miami, prove me wrong, and I'm going to pick Indiana to win this game. I think with the line being 8.5, you could easily see this game being really close, and then Miami being down by like a field goal at the end. They're going to either tie or win the game. And on that drive, like Beck throws an interception for a pick six or a fumble, scoop, and score. Like you could easily see it being a close game, and then at the last second, that score margin jumping over the spread. So I'm going to pick Indiana to cover too. Let me know y'all's predictions in the comments. Score predictions, who you think going to win, all of the above. If Carson Beck's going to crap the bed, if Fernando Mendoza is going to be held hostage by Akeem Mesidor and Ruben Bain. Let me know what you think. All right. Transfer portal intel. We have a lot of players in the transfer portal, as many of you know. Y'all are all, if you're watching this, big-time fans, especially if you're at this point in the show. More than 6,700 D1 athletes, or D1 football players, are in the transfer portal, or have entered the transfer portal and have signed somewhere else, which is just, it's just mind-blowing. Like, the amount of roster turnover for all these teams. But and then even in the FBS alone, 3,164 players have either already entered the portal and signed or are in the portal right now. It's a problem, in my opinion. You have way too much turnover from year to year for coaches to try to have continuity within their programs. And it's also really tough to get fans connected when all their players that people connect to people, right? And so when you have people that fans are connected to and they're not like already big time fans, and then those guys leave, then they're like, well, what the heck should I follow this team for anymore? And once you're a committed fan, then you follow the team regardless of who's there. But like if you're just getting into it, it's really hard when you have guys who you love to watch every Saturday, and then all of a sudden they're on another team the next year. And it's not just like 1 or 2 or 10, it's like 20. Like you have 20 guys leaving your roster every year or hopping in the portal to get more NIL money. So that needs to be changed. And I think I've already hashed out my plan for that once I become college football president. But, one second. All right. 2 days ago, Justice Haynes committed to Georgia Tech. Obviously, huge pickup for Georgia Tech. This is a former Michigan running back who started there, started at Alabama as well. This past season, he had 857 yards on 121 carries and 10 touchdowns. And that's an average of 7.1 yards per carry, which is pretty good if you didn't know. That's 6th in the nation. And he did all that before October 25th, which was his last game that he played because he got hurt. And so, obviously, huge pickup for Brent Key. They've lost a lot with their O-line coach, Jeep Wade, and their offensive coordinator, Buster Faulkner, leaving. A lot of the offensive staff went with Faulkner to Florida. And alongside that, multiple offensive linemen have transferred, left with Jeep Wade. And also Aaron Philo, and Bailey Stockton have left with Buster Faulkner. Those are just the big names. There was more that left. So now that they're acquiring players and big-time players at that, it's looking better for the Jackets. Bama, they've lost a lot of defensive players, like an alarming amount of not just like 3rd and 4th string guys. Like these are starters and rotational guys. Like an alarming amount of them have left for the portal. You have 21 players in all that are leaving this roster. And then you also have like big time names like Isaiah Horton, who went to Texas A&M, Kelby Collins, who went to Ohio State, and Keon Keeley. That was the one that really surprised me. And Keon Keeley committed to Notre Dame, Quay Russaw, and there was one more. It might have been, Collins and Russaw, I think, went to Ohio State. So just a lot of turnover, surprisingly, in my opinion. I feel like, I don't want to say that DeBoer is losing the roster, but it feels like there's not a whole lot of good energy coming out of that Alabama program right now. And then for those that saw, Sam Leavitt, he's committed to LSU, signed there. And there was a lot of teams, obviously, that were trying to get him. He was the number 1 ranked guy in most portal rankings. He went to like Tennessee, Miami, LSU, obviously, that I know of, and a lot of them were offering big-time money. And because of that, because he ended up going to LSU, Ty Simpson, who recently declared for the NFL draft, he had multiple big offers to come back to college from teams like Miami, Tennessee, and Ole Miss. They were offering him upwards of $4 million, according to On3. And then when Miami missed out on Leavitt, they came back to Simpson and offered him $6.5 million, apparently, according to On3. And he still decided to go to the draft. Props to him. Glad he got to do his dream of, making it to the big leagues. We'll see where he goes during the draft, but regardless, he had a great year this year, kind of fell off towards the end, but still proved himself, in my opinion. Ole Miss has also hit it big in the portal. They have gotten a lot of players, like from proven programs, or proven players from big time programs. Maybe not proven programs because some of them are from Florida. But they got a lot of edge guys initially, a lot of D linemen, a lot of linebackers, safeties and cornerbacks too. So basically a whole defense, and like two deep at each spot. It's kind of crazy, and they've spent a lot of money. They've invested a lot of money because Lane Kiffin left for LSU. I think the boosters and higher ups at Ole Miss are trying to get back at Lane by getting the best roster they can possibly get and trying to beat him next year, which good for them. And good for Pete Golding because now he gets to work with a lot of really good players. So they've picked up some big-time names, and they've also gotten some guys on offense, some receivers, Cameron Miller from Kentucky, which I'm excited about, a couple other receivers, and running back J.T. Lindsey. I think he was from Ohio State. And then you also got the big name in Deuce Knight, who was a former five-star recruit out of high school, went to Auburn for a year. I think he played the game against Mercer, looked good in that, but obviously he was a true freshman, still needs some development. So they picked him up. We're still trying to bid on like Sam Levitt and some other big-time names like Ty Simpson, but they ended up getting Deuce. Looks like that might be their guy, but we still got a couple days of portal left because even though this is the last day of the portal window, if you have already done your paperwork before the end of the day on January 16th, you can still commit to a school and sign there in the coming days, which is just nuts in my opinion. I think it should just be done when the window closes. Like, you got to find your school by January 16th. You've had January 2nd to 16th. And for the people that are in the playoffs, of course, like, give them some extra time. But for all the other people, they need to figure it out so then we can move on. Because, I don't know, I've tried to figure out if there was a hard deadline when people had to sign and commit, but they didn't say anything. So I'm assuming there's not. And then Texas Tech, on the same note as Ole Miss, made a big splash, have done really well getting a lot of edge guys, a lot of linebackers that are pass rushers, D linemen, and then just a bunch of names in general. Them and Indiana have been like super big in the portal as far as getting a whole lot of guys that are maybe not the biggest names but have proven stats and are going to produce, in my opinion. And then they also got Sorsby at quarterback. Brennan Sorsby was at Cincinnati this past year, if you didn't know. Had a really good year. They paid him apparently $5 million, according to On3, which is just wild. So the quarterback market for NIL has gone up. And then, like I mentioned, Aaron Philo and Bailey Stockton, if you aren't familiar with them, they played at Prince Avenue Christian in Athens, in high school, of course, and won multiple state championships, were a dynamic quarterback-receiver duo that Stockton helped Philo break the Georgia career passing record, and both of them were at Georgia Tech last year, or the past 2 years, actually. And we'll see how they do in Florida. I think I like both of their upside. I watched them play in person. They're both really good players. And they both transferred to Florida, by the way, with Faulkner. And we'll see if Philo gets the starting spot. If he does, I imagine that offense will do really well. And the reason why is because probably the biggest portal news for the Gators is that Jaden Ball, the running back that started for Florida this year, is returning to Florida for the 2026 season. Him along with Dallas Wilson, who was a highly touted recruit at high school, was a true freshman last year, and Vernell Brown III, also a true freshman receiver. They're all returning. So you got your starting running back, who is really, really good. You got two young receivers that should be there for a couple of years. Well, now we don't know with the transfer portal. But you'll have very highly talented receivers, and they're also picking up guys in the portal. But that sets up the offense to have really explosive skill players. And so with Faulkner at the helm, he ran a lot of quarterback run with Haynes King, but really his offense is more of an air raid offense if you look at his years before having Haynes at quarterback. So I imagine they'll go to more of that, and Florida will have a high-flying offense this upcoming year, if people can stay healthy, of course. And then in other news, Clemson is taking like more than 4 transfers. So far they have 10 transfers committed, and they had only 4 last year. And then we still got time left for them to get more. And they're not just like Joe Blows. Like, they're getting guys from other Power 4 programs that are pretty good. And I was like, kind of surprised. I thought Dabo was just going to keep doubling down and not take any people out of the transfer portal. But kind of have to at this point with how much roster turn you have. You have to fill positions. Like, you're getting so many guys that are leaving. You have to backfill and have spots for your scout team and have people for depth. Like, transfer portal is so crazy this year, but they have 13 people leaving as of right now, although some of them aren't committed anywhere. So really the plus minus isn't bad. They're only like 3 off. So yeah, just surprising. Something to note there. I don't know if Clemson will be able to turn it around, but they are changing their ways. And then, although it's, like I said, last day of portal day today, but expect more movement in the coming days because there's so many people that are still in the portal that have not committed anywhere, not signed anywhere, still visiting. So I'm really excited for the Monday National Championship night, especially because we have the whole day off because of MLK Day. I hope you're excited too. It's the National Championship. This is way more exciting to me than the one that was last year between Ohio State and Notre Dame. Although it was a good matchup. It was just, I don't know, I got burnt out last year by that time. But this year, I'm still so locked in, ready to see what happens with Carson Beck and the Miami Hurricanes and see if they can knock off Indiana. Yeah, have a great long weekend. Hope to see you next week when I provide some reaction and update on some portal. We might go over, probably review some teams as far as their seasons in comparison with their preseason expectations, things of that nature. So be locked in, subscribe, throw a like in there, and as always, God bless.